The human delegation's laughter echoed through the Grand Assembly Hall, bouncing off the crystalline walls and creating an unsettling counterpoint to the grave silence from the other representatives. Admiral Helena Chen tried to compose herself, dabbing at the corner of her eye with her sleeve. "I apologize for our reaction," she said, her voice still carrying a note of amusement. "But you must understand, this is quite unexpected. The concept of interstellar warfare has been relegated to historical archives for nearly 3 millennia. Ambassador Carix's compound eyes flickered with a pattern that translated universally as indignation. The Xantibian Empire does not make declarations in jest, human. Our grievances are legitimate and our resolve absolute." A murmur rippled through the assembly as delegates from hundreds of worlds shifted uncomfortably. Many species hadn't even evolved to sentience when the last interstellar conflict ended. Dr. Elijah Okonkwo, Earth's foremost diplomatic historian, leaned toward Admiral Chen and whispered, "I believe they're actually serious, Helena." Chen's smile faded slightly as she studied the Xantibian delegation more carefully. Their posture, the formal arrangement of their honor guard, the traditional war markings painted across their carapaces, all pointed to genuine intent. "Very well," she responded, straightening her ceremonial uniform. "For the record, what exactly are these grievances that warrant breaking 3,000 years of galactic peace?" The Xantibian ambassador clicked his mandibles in the pattern that indicated formal accusation. "Humanity has engaged in cultural imperialism across 17 sectors. Your art, your music, your philosophy of peace through cultural understanding undermines the warrior heritage of the Xantibian people. 3 generations of our youth have grown soft with human ideals. They question our hierarchical structure. They seek individual expression over collective strength." Several human delegates exchanged glances, eyebrows raised. "Ambassador," Chen replied carefully, "cultural exchange is not imperialism. We have shared our heritage just as we have embraced elements from hundreds of other civilizations, including certain architectural principles from the Xantibian Third Dynasty that grace many human settlements." "You mistake our meaning," hissed Sub-Commander Frex, standing beside the ambassador. "It is not exchange when your culture consumes all others. The human way spreads like a virus, appealing to the weak-minded across the galaxy." Dr. Okonkwo cleared his throat. "With respect, that sounds more like a compliment than a grievance." This sparked another round of barely suppressed laughter from the human delegation, causing several Xantibians to clack their mandibles in the pattern of mortal challenge. The Arcturian moderator, a being of pure energy contained within an ornate hovering shell, moved between the delegations. "This assembly has not witnessed a declaration of war since the cooperation accords were signed. We must observe proper protocol." The moderator's translation matrix produced a voice of perfect neutrality. "Admiral Chen, do you formally acknowledge the Xantibian Declaration?" Chen glanced at her colleagues, who nodded with expressions ranging from curiosity to bemusement. None showed fear. "The United Earth Cooperative acknowledges that the Xantibian Empire believes itself to be at war with humanity," she stated carefully. "We will convene our historical crisis response team to formulate an appropriate reaction to this unexpected development." As the human delegation filed out of the chamber, Lieutenant Commander Seto whispered to Chen, "Historical crisis response team. We don't have one of those." Chen's eyes twinkled as she replied, "We will by morning. I'm thinking a panel of military historians, game theorists, and perhaps a few enthusiastic reenactors. This could actually be rather interesting." Behind them, the rest of the Galactic Concord erupted into chaotic debate, while the Xantibian delegation stood rigid in confusion. They had expected terror, panic, desperate pleas for mercy, anything but laughter, and the formation of an academic committee. Grand Marshal Vexorn turned away from the strategic display, his secondary appendages twitching with satisfaction. "Their response confirms our intelligence," he announced to his war council. "They treat our declaration as a curiosity, not a threat. Their arrogance will be their downfall." Strategic Analyst Sklith, the youngest member of the War Council, raised a hesitant appendage. Grand Marshal, might I suggest their reaction indicates not arrogance, but genuine confusion. Our deep cover agents report no military mobilization, no emergency measures, no evacuation protocols. Vexorn's mandibles clicked dismissively. Because they are incapable of mounting an effective defense, their peaceful society has forgotten how to fight. Perhaps, Sklith persisted, but consider their historical records. Before the Great Peace, humans were remarkably adaptable warriors. Their military doctrines evolved rapidly during their planetary conflicts, and again during the border skirmishes of the early interstellar era. The Grand Marshal circled the younger Zentibian, his carapace looming over the analyst. Ancient history. Their last warship was decommissioned nearly 3,000 years ago. Their military expertise has atrophied. Their warrior spirit has been diluted through generations of comfort. Meanwhile, across human space, the public response to the Zentibian Declaration continued to evolve in unexpected ways. In the orbital habitat Nouveau Paris, the holographic marquee outside the Museum of Conflict Studies advertised a hastily assembled exhibition. Understanding War. A historical retrospective. The line of curious visitors stretched around the habitat's central promenade. Inside, Dr. Amara Osai carefully removed a preservation field from a display case containing what appeared to be primitive projectile weapons. Careful with those, cautioned her colleague, Dr. Hiroshi Tanaka. Some of these artifacts are over 2,500 years old. The preservation fields have kept them in perfect working order, Dr. Osei replied, lifting what the display identified as an M4 carbine. According to the records, this was standard issue for ground forces in the 21st century. Nearby, a group of university students huddled around a tactical simulation table. The ancient device hummed to life, projecting a three-dimensional model of space combat scenarios. Look at these formation patterns, said Jinwei, a doctoral candidate in historical anthropology. The textbooks always described Zentibian tactics as highly regimented and hierarchical, but seeing it modeled is fascinating. Their command structure creates predictable attack vectors. His classmate Sophia added, because their society values conformity, their battle doctrines lack adaptability. According to Professor Mbiki's analysis, that was their downfall in the Arcturus conflict. Jin Wei nodded. If they haven't evolved their approach, and given their cultural resistance to change, they likely haven't. They'd still be vulnerable to the countermeasures developed during that era. Across the room, Museum Director Dr. Paddle received an unexpected communication from the United Earth Council. He read it twice, his expression shifting from surprise to intrigue. I need to make an announcement, he called out to his colleagues. The Council has formally activated the Archival Preservation Protocol. We are being asked to compile all tactical and strategic resources in our collection for historical documentation purposes. Dr. Tanaka raised an eyebrow. That protocol hasn't been invoked since, well, ever. Indeed. Dr. Paddle smiled faintly. Apparently we're forming something called a Historical Crisis Response Team. The Council is requesting specialists in military history, game theory, tactical analysis, and this part is rather amusing, enthusiastic historical reenactors. Reenactors, Dr. Oside repeated. Yes. It seems we're going to study the Zentibian threat as a living historical exercise. Dr. Patel's eyes twinkled. I must say, in 30 years of museum work, I never expected to see our archives used for their original purpose. Outside the museum, life continued largely unchanged. In town squares and communal gardens across human space, people discussed the curious declaration of war with the same level of interest they might give to an unusual weather pattern or a new restaurant opening. No panic, no fear, just intellectual curiosity and the faint stirring of something long dormant in the collective human consciousness. Captain Skiva stared at the view screen, mandibles clicking in agitation as yet another human pleasure craft drifted past his forward sensors. The vessel, designated Caribbean Dream, was broadcasting cheerful music and advertisements for its onboard amenities. "This is unprecedented," muttered his second-in-command. "Their response to our arrival violates all conflict protocols." Skivak shittered a command, and the communications officer established a link to the nearest human vessel, a scientific platform cataloging Jovian atmospheric anomalies. "Attention human vessel," Skiva announced, his translator converting his clicks and hisses into standard galactic common. "You are in the presence of the Xantibian Vanguard fleet. Clear this operational zone immediately or face destruction." After a brief pause, a smiling human face appeared on the screen. The woman wore what appeared to be a casual uniform with a patch identifying her as Dr. Maya Rodriguez, Atmospheric Sciences. "Greetings, Xantibian vessel," she responded cheerfully. "We received notification of your arrival from Central Traffic Control. If you're planning weapons demonstrations in this sector, we'd appreciate a 30-minute heads-up so we can reposition our atmospheric sensors. The dispersal patterns in Jupiter's upper atmosphere are fascinating when disturbed by energy discharges." Skiva's compound eyes flickered in confusion. "This is not a demonstration. We are the vanguard of a war fleet." Dr. Rodriguez's expression didn't change. "Of course, the historical reenactment. We've been briefed. Actually, several of our team members would love to observe your tactical formations, purely for academic interest. You understand." The Xantibian commander cut the transmission, mandibles clicking rapidly in the pattern denoting extreme frustration. "They mock us," he hissed. "We will demonstrate our seriousness." He issued sharp commands, and the Xantibian fleet reoriented toward an uninhabited monitoring station orbiting Neptune's moon Triton. Energy weapons charged with an ominous hum. "Target the station. Full disintegration protocol," Skiva ordered. The weapons officer complied, and lances of purple energy streaked across space. The monitoring station erupted into a spectacular explosion, debris scattering in a glittering cloud against Neptune's blue backdrop. "Broadcast on all frequencies," Skiva commanded. "Attention human populations. The Xantibian Empire has demonstrated its power. This was merely a fraction of our capability. Surrender your worlds, or face similar destruction." Within minutes, human news networks across the system had picked up the footage. On Galactic Morning, Earth's most popular breakfast program, hosts Imani Washington and Paolo Chen watched the replay on their studio screens. "We're receiving live footage of what appears to be a Xantibian demonstration near Neptune," Imani explained to viewers. "We've got military historian Dr. Eliza Washington joining us." "Doctor, what are we seeing here?" The split screen showed a distinguished older woman sipping from a steaming cup. "Fascinating display, actually. That's clearly particle beam technology reminiscent of the Arcturus conflict era, roughly 2,900 years ago. Notice the distinctive purple ionization signature. That's characteristic of thorium cascade acceleration." Paolo nodded thoughtfully. "And the explosive yield. It seems quite dramatic." "Indeed," Dr. Washington agreed. "Rather theatrical, prioritizing visual impact over efficiency. Military historians would rate this as a demonstration weapon rather than a practical battlefield application. The energy-to-damage ratio is quite poor. A score out of 10. Imani prompted with a smile. 6 for historical accuracy, 8 for visual display," Dr. Washington replied without hesitation. The Xantibians appear to be using ancient weapon designs rather than developing their own innovations. Meanwhile, at the United Earth Council's headquarters in Geneva, Admiral Chen reviewed the footage with her hastily assembled historical crisis response team. "They've destroyed an unmanned monitoring station," reported Lieutenant Commander Sato. "No casualties." Chen nodded. "Begin preparation of a diplomatic response vessel. I want a delegation of conflict archaeologists, military historians, and cultural anthropologists ready to depart within 12 hours. "That's our response to an act of war?" asked a junior officer, looking confused. Admiral Chen smiled. Young man, when someone resurrects practices from 3,000 years ago, the appropriate first response is academic study. Let's find out what they hope to achieve with these historical demonstrations. The ancient security doors finished their sequence of scans, finally recognizing Dr. Emir Patel's authorization. As museum director, he possessed the theoretical clearance to access the sealed vaults, but no one had actually tested the systems in centuries. Decontamination complete. Genetic verification confirmed. Welcome, Director Patel, announced the surprisingly pleasant voice of the security system. The massive vault doors swung inward with surprising silence, revealing a cavernous chamber extending deep into the Martian bedrock. Lights activated sequentially, illuminating row after row of perfectly preserved data crystals, holographic storage units, and physical documents in stasis fields. The complete military archives of humanity, whispered Dr. Astrid Johansson, Patel's assistant curator. I never imagined I'd actually see inside. Nor did I, Patel admitted, stepping reverently across the threshold. The Omega protocols were theoretical exercises. I never expected to implement them. They moved deeper into the vault, passing sections labeled with ancient military designations: strategic command, tactical operations, asymmetric warfare, space-based defense networks. Each section contained the accumulated knowledge of thousands of years of human conflict, preserved not out of fear, but from the historian's deep respect for the past. Where do we begin? Astrid asked, her historian's curiosity battling with overwhelming awe. Patel consulted the inventory system on his wrist display. The Historical Crisis Response Team requested tactical analyses of insectoid species from the pre-peace era. Section 47B should contain the complete records of the Arcturus conflict. As they navigated the labyrinthine archive, Patel's communicator chimed with an incoming message. Admiral Chen's face appeared in holographic form. Dr. Patel, I trust the vault access was successful. Indeed, Admiral. We're gathering the requested materials now. Chen nodded. Excellent. I should inform you that Centibian propaganda broadcasts have begun throughout human space. Apparently, they're trying to demoralize our population. Patel raised an eyebrow. How are people responding? Chen's lips quirked upward. Not quite as the Centibians intended. The broadcasts have become something of a cultural phenomenon. Entertainment venues are hosting viewing parties. Someone has created a drinking game. Meanwhile, across human settlements, the Centibian broadcasts had indeed taken on an unexpected life. In a crowded pub on Luna's Armstrong City, patrons cheered as the insectoid face of a Centibian commander filled the wall screen. Your feeble human defenses will crumble before our might. The translation scrolled beneath the alien's clicking mandibles. Your worlds will be reduced to cosmic dust. Cosmic dust, shouted several patrons in unison, raising their glasses and drinking deeply. That's the third cosmic reference, laughed a young woman, marking the square on her digital bingo card. One more, and I'd win. In orbit around Earth, the popular entertainment channel, Historical Horizons, had hastily produced a new reality competition show. The glittering set of So You Think You Can War featured a panel of judges, actual military historians, evaluating civilian contestants' theoretical defense systems. Your design incorporates mining lasers repurposed as point defense weapons, noted Judge Dr. Fatima Al-Bekri, examining the holographic display. An elegant solution that leverages existing infrastructure. The contestant, a graduate student in historical engineering, beamed with pride. The frequency modulation would allow standard mining equipment to disrupt Centibian shield harmonics based on the technical specifications observed in their demonstration at Neptune. In the production booth, network executives watched viewer metrics climb to unprecedented levels. We should have invented an alien threat years ago, joked one producer. Ratings are through the roof. Yet beneath the entertainment value and seeming frivolity, something more profound was occurring. The neural networks of Earth's central knowledge repository silently analyzed thousands of amateur designs, identifying innovative approaches that diverged from standard historical doctrine. The best concepts were quietly flagged and routed to the Historical Crisis Response Team, where they were incorporated into evolving strategic models. And deep in the Martian archives, Dr. Paddle discovered something unexpected. A message left by the last generation to witness actual conflict, addressed to whoever might need these archives in the future. We preserved these weapons of war not because we feared they would be needed again, but because forgetting the cost of conflict would be the first step toward repeating it. Use this knowledge wisely. The azure skies of New Horizon darkened as the Zentibian attack fleet descended through the atmosphere. Their ships arranged in the traditional conquest formation documented in historical texts. Commander Trexel stood on the command deck, anticipating the chaos that typically preceded planetary subjugation. Emergency broadcasts, scattered resistance, panicked evacuation efforts. Instead, his sensors detected an orderly gathering at the main colony plaza. No defensive emplacements, no hastily assembled militia. Just a small group of humans standing calmly in formation, many carrying what appeared to be scientific equipment. Magnify, he ordered, mandibles clicking in confusion. The view screen zoomed in to show a human female in what appeared to be academic attire, holding a small sign written in perfect Zentibian script. "Welcome to New Horizon. Scientific Observation Team." "This is irregular," muttered his tactical officer. The fleet touched down surrounding the plaza, deployment ramps extending as Zentibian warriors emerged in full battle carapace. Commander Trexel approached the human delegation cautiously, weapons systems primed. "I am Commander Trexel of the Zentibian Empire," he announced through his translator. "This colony is now under Zentibian control." The human woman stepped forward with a pleasant smile. "Dr. Maya Wong, Sinoanthropology Department, Earth Central University. We're absolutely thrilled you've chosen New Horizon for your first planetary engagement." Trexel's compound eyes flickered in confusion. "You misunderstand. This is not an academic exercise. This is conquest." "Of course," Dr. Wong nodded enthusiastically. "We've established observation posts throughout the settlement to study your tactical approaches. We've prepared detailed documentation of our infrastructure to save you the trouble of discovery. Would you prefer digital or physical copies? We've prepared both." Before the bewildered commander could respond, his communications officer approached with urgency in his movements. "Commander, we're receiving reports from across human space. Something unexpected is happening. Across the solar system and beyond, ancient systems long dormant were stirring to life. On Earth's moon, tourists at the Historical Defense Museum watched in amazement as the observation platform they stood upon began to transform. Decorative panels slid away, revealing sophisticated weapon systems that hummed with power as they oriented themselves toward space. "Is this part of the tour?" asked a confused visitor. The museum guide looked equally surprised. "No, this is definitely not on the program." On Earth itself, in every major city center, the famous sleeping sentinels were awakening. These 100-meter humanoid mechs had stood as peace monuments for millennia, their weapon systems converted to artistic light displays, their massive forms serving as climbing structures for playing children. In Tokyo's Central Plaza, 6-year-old Hana Tanaka watched wide-eyed as the sentinel she had been sitting beneath just moments before straightened from its kneeling position, ancient joints moving with surprising grace. The ground trembled as it took its first step in 3,000 years. "Dad, is this part of the regular maintenance test?" she asked, tugging at her father's sleeve. Akira Tanaka stared upward, equally transfixed. "No, sweetheart. I think the hibernation is over." Across human space, systems designed to be hidden in plain sight revealed their true nature. The ornate stellarium dome of Cambridge University split open like a blossoming flower, a massive sensor array emerging to scan the heavens. The decorative obelisks lining Washington's National Mall hummed to life, revealing themselves as components of a planetary shield generator. In museums worldwide, display cases containing ancient weapons systematically unlocked, preservation fields deactivating. A nervous docent at the Chicago Military History Wing straightened her uniform as visitors gathered around the suddenly accessible exhibits. "Please don't touch the artifacts," she announced automatically, then paused. "Unless, of course, you're certified in historical weapons operation." To everyone's surprise, several elderly visitors stepped forward, presenting identification credentials that hadn't been used in generations. "Retired Historical Preservation Corps," explained one silver-haired woman, handling a plasma rifle with practiced ease. "We maintain the knowledge, just in case." Back on New Horizon, Dr. Wong's communicator chimed. She glanced at it, then smiled at Commander Trexel with new understanding. "It appears the observation phase of our interaction is concluding," she said pleasantly. "The response phase will be commencing shortly. Would you care to revise your approach? We're quite open to discussing alternatives to traditional conquest protocols." As if to emphasize her point, the ground beneath them trembled slightly as defense systems buried beneath the seemingly defenseless colony began to power up, systems so elegantly integrated into the architecture and landscape that they had been invisible until activated. Commander Trexel suddenly understood that the humans hadn't been unprepared for war. They had simply been waiting to see if the Xantibians were serious before responding in kind. 80 days after the initial declaration of war, the Galactic Concord convened an emergency session. The chamber hummed with nervous energy as delegates whispered among themselves, sharing rumors of awakening human defense systems across the galaxy. The assembly fell silent as Admiral Helena Chen took the podium. Gone was the bemused diplomat from the previous session. She now wore a sleek combat suit bearing insignia not seen for millennia, her silver-streaked hair pulled back in a practical style. Her earlier laughter had been replaced with the measured calm of a person who had rediscovered an old, well-practiced skill. "Representatives of the Galactic Concord," she began, her voice carrying throughout the chamber without technological assistance. "For 3,000 years, humanity has maintained peace, not because we feared war, but because we had mastered it so thoroughly that it held no further interest for us." Holographic displays activated around the chamber, showing scenes from across human space. The delegates gasped at images of massive defense platforms emerging from what had appeared to be orbital habitats, ancient warships shedding their museum casings to reveal fully functional systems beneath. "We kept our capabilities preserved as museum pieces," Chen continued, "as reminders of who we once were and who we chose not to be anymore. The Xantibians have mistaken our peace for weakness, our museums for graveyards." She gestured to the displays, which now showed human civilians continuing their daily lives almost uninterrupted. Children attended schools, workers went to their jobs, artists created in their studios, all while ancient defense systems hummed to life around them. "As you can see, we have not disrupted our society to respond to this threat. Only a small percentage of our population, barely 3%, has volunteered for what we're calling the Historical Reenactment Fleet." The displays shifted to show humans in simple uniforms boarding reactivated vessels. They moved with calm precision, their expressions more curious than fearful. "Who are these warriors?" asked the Arcturian moderator. "Not warriors," Chen corrected gently. "Historians, engineers, anthropologists, and enthusiasts of ancient military history. Citizens who have studied our martial past as an academic pursuit, never expecting to apply that knowledge practically." In deep space, near the Xantibian forward base, the reactivated dreadnought Remembrance moved into position. On its bridge, Dr. Ayanna Jefferson adjusted her station with academic precision. Normally the head curator of Earth's Ancient Weapons Division, she now served as weapons officer. "Target acquisition complete," she reported, her voice carrying the same tone she might use when cataloging a particularly interesting artifact. "Fascinating how elegant these targeting systems are. The engineers who built them really understood tactical geometry." Captain Nguyen, a professor of historical military strategy, nodded appreciatively. Indeed. Notice how the predictive algorithms anticipate the Xantibian evasive patterns. 3,000 years old, yet still capable of learning new enemy behaviors. The volunteer crew operated with the calm efficiency of scholars handling familiar research tools. None had served in actual combat. No human had for millennia. Yet their academic understanding of warfare translated seamlessly into practical application. When the human counterattack began, the Xantidians found themselves facing an opponent unlike any they had imagined. The reactivated human fleet moved with precise coordination, each maneuver executed with textbook perfection. Weapon systems fired with surgical accuracy, disabling rather than destroying when possible. "Their shields are neutralized," reported Dr. Jefferson as the Remembrance engaged a Xantibian cruiser. "Propulsion systems targeted and disabled." "Open communications," ordered Captain Guion. When the channel opened, he addressed the Xantibian vessel with polite formality. "Xantibian cruiser, your vessel has been rendered non-operational. We offer safe passage for your crew if you choose to abandon ship. Alternatively, we can provide technical assistance to maintain life support while you await retrieval by your forces." Across the engagement zone, similar conversations were taking place as human vessels systematically disabled the Xantibian fleet. Many enemy ships surrendered without firing a shot, their crews stunned by the casual expertise with which humans had returned to the art of warfare. In orbit around the Xantibian forward base, a scout ship commander watched in disbelief as human vessels emerged from hyperspace in perfect formation. His tactical officers' mandibles trembled as they reported. "Their targeting solutions are locked before our sensors even detect them. Their weapon systems are generations beyond our most advanced technology." A commander made a decision unprecedented in Xantibian military history. He opened communications on all frequencies and said simply, "We surrender. Please instruct us on your protocols." The human response came immediately, in perfect Xantibian language complete with the formal dialect reserved for scholarly discourse. "We accept your surrender. Please power down your weapons and prepare to receive our diplomatic team. We're particularly interested in documenting your martial cultural heritage for our anthropological archives." As news of these encounters spread through the Xantibian forces, more ships began to surrender without resistance. They had expected to face desperate, untrained civilians hastily pressed into service. Instead, they found themselves outmatched by scholars and curators who approached warfare with the meticulous precision of academic research. Grand Marshal Vexorn's command ship trembled as another precision strike penetrated their defenses. Warning lights flashed across the bridge as system after system reported critical failures. Around him, his most elite war nests, strategists bred for tactical genius across 12 generations, had fallen silent, their compound eyes fixed on tactical displays, showing the systematic collapse of the once mighty Xantibian battle formations. "Impossible," whispered his senior strategist, mandibles trembling. "Their attack patterns evolve faster than we can analyze them. Each time we adapt, they counter before we implement." Vexorn moved to the command interface, pushing aside his tactical officer to examine the raw data himself. The human vessels moved with a level of coordination that defied conventional military doctrine. Each maneuver was executed with precision that spoke of thousands of years of refinement, yet displayed innovations that couldn't have been prepared in advance. "How?" he demanded of no one in particular. "Our intelligence was perfect. They maintained only token military forces. Their ships were museums, their weapons decommissioned." A junior communications officer approached hesitantly. "Grand Marshal, we've intercepted internal communications from the human vessel designated Remembrance. They appear to be discussing our tactics as historical curiosities." The officer activated a holographic display, and the translated conversation filled the command center. "Notice the formation shift. Classic Xantibian envelopment pattern, straight from the Arcturus conflict. Exactly as documented in the Third Dynasty Military Codex. Indeed, Professor, they haven't evolved their approach in 3 millennia. Fascinating cultural stasis." Their adherence to historical precedent makes their movements predictable. Implementing countermeasure pattern Epsilon 7. Vexorn's antennae twitched as understanding finally dawned. They're not soldiers, he realized aloud. They're historians and academics. He turned to his intelligence officer. Accessed the deepest archival records of the Arcturus conflict. What were the human capabilities before the peace accords? The officer worked quickly, ancient data scrolling across his screen. According to the records, humans demonstrated unprecedented tactical adaptation. Their technology evolved rapidly during the conflict, and their command structure allowed for innovative approaches that our ancestors found unpredictable. Vexorn chittered softly as the final piece clicked into place. Humans hadn't abandoned war because they feared it or were incapable of it. They had set it aside because they had mastered it so completely that it no longer presented a challenge worthy of their attention. His ship shuddered again as another precision strike disabled their main propulsion. Emergency lighting bathed the command center in an ominous red glow. "Prepare my personal communication array," Vexorn ordered. "Direct link to the Emperor. Highest encryption." When the connection was established, Vexorn did not waste time with formalities. "My Emperor, I have failed you, but in that failure, I have discovered a truth vital to our species' survival." The Emperor's compound eyes flickered with a pattern indicating grave concern. "Explain, Grand Marshal." "We fundamentally misunderstood the humans," Vexorn began, his mandibles clicking in the pattern of profound realization. "They didn't abandon war because they feared it. They set it aside because they had solved it, like a mathematical equation that no longer held challenge." As his ship's systems flickered under another precision strike, Vexorn continued urgently. "They preserved their weapons not out of lingering fear, but with the careful reverence historians show to important artifacts. They maintained the knowledge not because they anticipated using it again, but because humans never willingly discard knowledge." The Emperor's mandibles clacked in the pattern indicating skepticism. "If what you say is true, why do they not simply obliterate our forces? Their restraint suggests weakness." "No, my Emperor," Vexorn corrected. "Their restraint demonstrates mastery. They disable rather than destroy because they value knowledge above victory. They seek to preserve our culture, our history, our very existence, even as we threaten theirs. This is not the action of a weak species, but one so secure in their capabilities that they can afford mercy." An alarm blared as the ship's final defensive systems failed. Through the view screen, Vexorn could see a human vessel approaching, sleek, elegant, and utterly devastating in its precision. "Their peace wasn't maintained through weakness," he continued, knowing this might be his final report. "It was built upon such complete mastery of conflict that they could afford to transform their warships into museums and their soldiers into curators. We didn't break their peace. We reminded them of a language they had chosen not to speak, but never forgot." The communication system flickered as power systems began to fail. "My Emperor, I recommend immediate." The transmission cut off as the ship's power core initiated emergency shutdown. Emergency lighting dimmed, leaving the command center in near darkness. Through the viewports, Vexorn could see the human vessel holding position nearby, not firing, simply waiting. His communications officer looked up from her station. "Grand Marshal, we're receiving a transmission from the human vessel." A holographic display activated, showing a human female with silver-streaked hair and an expression of calm authority. "Xantibian Command Vessel, this is Dr. Harriet Okafor of Earth's Historical Documentation Division. Your ship has been disabled but remains structurally intact. We request your surrender and would welcome the opportunity to discuss your cultural perspectives on this conflict. We are particularly interested in documenting the Xantibian approach to warfare for our anthropological archives." Vexorn stared at the image, then chittered what might have been the Xantibian equivalent of laughter, a sound rarely heard from the martial species. "Open a channel," he ordered. "I believe I would find such a discussion enlightening." 3 months to the day after the declaration of war, representatives from the shattered Zentibian Empire knelt before the Galactic Concord, their once proud mandibles drooping in the formal posture of submission. The vast chamber was filled beyond capacity. Delegates from every spacefaring civilization crowded together to witness this historic moment. Grand Marshal Vexhorn, now serving as the Zentibian representative, had expected to face the traditional consequences of defeat: territorial concessions, resource reparations, perhaps even forced cultural re-education. These were the methods the Zentibians themselves would have imposed on vanquished enemies. Instead, Admiral Helena Chen approached the center of the chamber carrying only a simple data crystal. The crowd fell silent as she stood before the kneeling Zentibians, her expression neither triumphant nor vengeful. "Rise," she said simply. "Kneeling is unnecessary." Confused but obedient, the Zentibian delegation rose to their full height, towering over the human admiral. Chen held out the crystal. "This contains the philosophical framework of the Pax Humana," she explained to the astonished assembly. "The core principles that allowed humans to maintain peace for 3 millennia. We offer this freely to the Zentibian people, without condition or obligation." The Arcturian moderator's containment field flickered with confusion. "Admiral Chen, the Zentidians have committed acts of aggression against human territories. According to Concord protocols, you are entitled to reparations." Chen smiled slightly. "What would we do with reparations? Human society has evolved beyond resource scarcity. We have no territories we wish to expand, no populations we need to accommodate." She turned back to Vexhorn, who held the crystal with reverent care. "This knowledge was hard-won through our own bloody history. We studied warfare so thoroughly that we understood its fundamental limitations as a means of resolving differences. War is easy, a crude solution our ancestors reached for too quickly. Peace is the true challenge worthy of an advanced civilization." Vexhorn's compound eyes flickered with patterns indicating complex emotions rarely expressed by his species. "We do not understand. You could subjugate our worlds, claim our resources, eradicate our military capacity. Yet you offer knowledge instead. Precisely because we could do those things, we choose not to," Chen replied. "The greatest power lies not in demonstrating force, but in choosing when to withhold it. Our ancestors learned this lesson at tremendous cost. We offer you the opportunity to learn it without similar sacrifice." The Galactic Concord, which had watched in terror as human military capability reawakened, now listened in growing wonder as Chen announced the immediate decommissioning of all reactivated weapons. "We will return them to their museums," she declared, "where they belong. The historical reenactment fleet will be disbanded, its volunteer crews returning to their academic and civilian pursuits. Our defense systems will resume their dormant state, once again serving as monuments and reminders rather than instruments of destruction." Whispers spread through the assembly as delegates struggled to comprehend this unprecedented approach to victory. Back on Earth, Education Ministry officials were already updating the curriculum. In classrooms across human space, teachers explained the brief conflict to curious students. "But Ms. Lakshmi," asked a young boy in a New Delhi classroom, "if we knew how to fight, why didn't we do it before?" The teacher smiled. "Because we also knew how not to fight, which is a far more valuable skill." The Zentibians hadn't learned that lesson yet. The new exhibit at the Olympus Mons Military Museum. The 3-month war, a brief return to old ways, quickly became the most visited installation in human space. School children giggled as they toured the facility, examining artifacts from the brief conflict alongside much older weapons. "They really thought we couldn't defend ourselves?" a girl asked, staring at a holographic display showing Zentibian battle formations. The museum guide nodded. "They mistook our choice not to maintain active military forces as an inability to do so, rather than a conscious decision based on our values." In a separate wing, a Zentibian delegation toured the facility under the new cultural exchange program. They moved with solemn respect through displays documenting humanity's long, bloody history of internal and external conflicts, leading finally to the peace accords that had ended 3 millennia of warfare. "They find war amusing," whispered one young Xantibian to his elder, watching human children laughing at an interactive display simulating ancient battle tactics. How can they treat such a serious matter with such lightness? The elder's mandibles clicked thoughtfully. They find it amusing not because they don't understand its horror, but because they understood it so well they could choose to set it aside. Their laughter is not mockery, but the expression of freedom from something that once bound their species as it still binds ours. In the museum's central hall, beneath the preserved hull of the last warship commissioned before the peace accords, a new inscription had been added to the wall. Visitors from all species paused to read the elegant text. Peace is not the absence of conflict, but the presence of alternatives refined to such perfection that conflict becomes obsolete. The true measure of civilization is not its ability to wage war, but its capacity to render war unnecessary. As the last of the reactivated defense systems powered down across human space, returning to their status as historical curiosities, Admiral Chen stood on the observation deck of the lunar headquarters. Earth shone bright and blue in the viewport, unmarred by the conflict that had briefly interrupted humanity's long peace. "Do you think they'll understand?" asked Dr. Okafor, who had joined her after completing her anthropological studies of the Xantibian command structure. Chen smiled. "Eventually. The data crystal contains the complete history of how we achieved peace, including all our mistakes. They'll learn faster than we did. And if they don't," Okafor pressed gently. Chen's expression remained serene. "Then we'll be here, ready to remind them again. After all, teaching is what we do best now." Below them, museums across the lunar surface resumed their normal operations, weapon systems once again hidden beneath educational displays, dormant but not forgotten, preserved as reminders of a path humanity had traveled and chosen to transcend.